So we're starting today on the penultimate paragraph on the page Omer Tezayin, 3 lines from the bottom, about halfway through the line, the commission is boileo. So yesterday we explained how the Sheirish of Malchus is deeper than the Sheirish of Zah. That fundamentally creation is achieved through Malchus of Atzilus. And Malchus of Atzilus, in order to create, must be associated with Atzmus Umuhus. Because only Atzmus Umuhus, Ein Sof Baruch Hu, is capable of creating. Because the Eibishter is the only truly independent entity. So to create something with a sense of independence, the creator has to have that capacity within themselves. And if Malchus of Atzilus is, practically speaking, the stage in which creation comes about, the Yeshan Nivra is created, Eilam Abriya, and ultimately all the Eilamus Abriya, Tzir Asiya, then we must say that Malchus of Atzilus has a Koyach Atzmi, has this essential quality of Alikus, of the Eibishter, to create things. But nevertheless, in order for Malchus of Atzilus to achieve what it needs to achieve, it needs to have a hashpah, it needs to receive, needs to be a makabel from Zah. Now, for Zah to have that influence on Malchus that it should create, Zah itself has to become capable of having a koyach atzmi too. Has to have an association with atzmius. So we say that there's a hemshekh of Kesa into Zah for the purpose of Malchus. So the Sheirish of Malchus in Kesa and deeper in Atzmus Ein Sof is nishtalshul to Zah in the form of what we call an atara, a crown, and that is transmitted to Malchus to facilitate Malchus's role in the creation of the worlds. So that's what we discussed. But the fact that there is this gadlus in Zah, that it acquires this Kesa, that it has shaykhus to a Koyach Atzmi, is because of Malchus and for the sake of Malchus. Yeah, that's what we said till now. So he says in the Maimah, the commotion is boile il be'inyan adibur. And just like we explained above with regards to dibur, like we explained at the end of the first Maimah, that even the very initial development of an intellectual consciousness doesn't come about of its own accord. It is something that is triggered, that is inspired, that is made possible by the Eisius Hadibur. In order that ultimately that intellectual or emotional consciousness should come and become enclosed, meaning expressed in the letters of speech. So this is one of the key points. It's not just post facto that when ideas come into Dibur, then there's something, then Dibur has an impact on Seichel. The very initial expression of Dibur, expression of Seichel, or Midas, was caused by Dibur. So that's similar to what we've just said, that Malchus is the very cause of the hashpah into Zah. So too, and that is when we're talking about hashpah chitzonis, like we described, of just conveying an intellectual or an emotional consciousness. But the same thing is true when we're talking about a hashpah atzmis, an essential transmission in the process for the purpose of procreation. The hamshachas hashefa ha'atzmis, that this, what triggers or what makes plausible and possible the hashpah from the father, that the father should impregnate the mother. It's not that the mother, we're not saying just that the mother, post facto, after impregnation, she then has a significant role in the production of the child, but rather the fact that the father is able to trigger and reveal her procreative qualities, that itself was an achievement or caused by the female, by the mother. The procreative ability of the father is and that is what we're going to speak about in the next paragraph, how that is achieved. Not just that, she doesn't just. So we've compared hashpa atzmis of procreation to the dynamics of speaking, of Eisius Hadibor, and we've compared it also to Malchus and to Zah, in that the initial stage of hashpa that comes from the mashpia is also, in a sense, behind the scenes, is made plausible, made possible by the makabel. The makabel is the context in which there is a hashpa. There's only a hashpa because of the makabel. And in the case of Malchus, it causes there should be hemshekh of Kesed into Zah. In the case of Dibur, it causes there should be an initial effusion of intellectual or emotional activity. And in the case of the mother, it's the causing it's the arousing in the father that he should be procreative. He should be able to have a hashpa pnimis, that he should be able in his sperm to be able to convey his essence. His essence should be conveyed in the DNA of his sperm. That is something that she is the fundamental cause of. That's the claim. So, but more than that, post facto, after the impregnation, she also is the primary reason why the child is born. It's not just how the impregnation comes about, but post facto, once she is pregnant, she is the primary creator of the child, and it's not the koyach it's not the procreative quality of the father that creates the child, it's the procreative quality of the mother. So she has this bini yasera, which we describe. Bini yasera means this koyach of hiskalus, right? Bina has this power to reveal things to a far greater extent, and we used that term for dibur previously. Now we're going to use it specifically for the isha, more maybe in the context of the original Maimer Razal. So mashes havas hablad hu alidei hanuk v'davka mikoyach atzma chuli. And this principle is that the creation of a child by specifically the female is mikoyach atzma, is from her own quality, of her own creative quality that she intrinsically has. Just like Malchus, because it creates everything, is because it has a shaykhis to atzma seif that can create. So the isha, and we call Malchus isha, and we call Malchus nukva and nekeva. So in not just in the supernal mother, but in the biological mother, it's the same thing. It's the same quality because it's paralleling the same relational dynamics of the mashpia and the makabel.
By the way, what it says over here, wouldn't the dafka be going on the dafka megach atzma as opposed to nuk for dafka? It's not specifically the woman, it's specifically because of her keach. Because we're trying to bring about her and show that even though she's doing the 9 months, it's still could potentially think that it's the father's power. So even though, so we're saying no, it's not that, rather it's actually also her.
Yeah, so you're saying the comma should come before the dafka. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that reads better. Good, thank you. So now we're going to explain it. So for ha'inyan hu, the concept is as follows. I hope you're getting used to this, the benimtzas, the v'ha'inyan hus, the ubira inyans, to appreciate the structure. Ki yudua de kishem shehadchar mashpia tipas mad mayin duchurin, like it's known, just like the male is mashpia, provides what we call a drop of masculine waters. So this is euphemistically referring to the male creative material, the semen which contains the sperm. Yeah? Similarly too, the female offers and provides in the act of procreation a drop of feminine waters. Tipas main nukvin. Elosh tipas hamayin nukvin he kli lekabel b'seicha tipas hamad. But in these two contributions to the procreative act, the male contribution is provided and the feminine aspect receives it. So in modern physiology, the male semen contains sperm, and the woman has an ovum. She has ova. She has what sometimes referred to as eggs. And when the sperm connects with the ovum, it fertilizes the ovum, becomes an egg cell, what we call an egg cell. So they're both. These are the sort of their procreative. I think they call them gametes or something. Material that the male and the female have, but the way it works is that the ovum receives the sperm. Now, what may be interesting to think about is that historically, before we get into the physiology that he describes, which is not going to be necessarily identical with modern science, but even in the context historically about how people thought about how fertilization happened, how it was possible, there was a very strong ideology or perspective which lasted for many, many years. It goes back to prehistory, it goes back to the ancients and carried on way into the early modern period. People called preformationists. So people had an idea that everything was everything always existed. So the act of procreation was just evolving something that already exists. So everything existed in a sort of a miniature form or a microscopic form. So they even had an idea that, say, inside the sperm would be a little person. And all the act of gestation was a sort of an incubation that allowed the forming of this human being. So nothing was created anew. And then there were two different shittas, two different conflicting opinions. One, people were called spermists, and they thought that the origin of everything was in the sperm. And some people were called ovists, and they thought it was all in the eggs. But they didn't think that anything was being created new. There was no creation over here. It was just the evolving of something that already existed in a sort of maybe a cellular form, in a small form. As opposed to the other opinion, which said that there was something being originated. And so these terminologies of waters and everything you'll find in some of these earlier texts. And then we find it in the Kabbalah, the idea of a tipas man and a tipas mad. When it's talked about in Kabbalah, when it's not talking about the physiology of things, it's just a shorthand for talking about hemshekh mil maila lamata or a halo mil mata lamayla. So hemshekh is mad, or haloas man. Right? It's a shorthand for talking about hemshekhes and halois. Mad and madbi. So, because the male, in the act of procreation, the male is the mashpia, it gives. So it's the idea of hemshekh. Whereas the female is the makabel. So it rebounds. So it's more of an aliyah. The aliyah is a makabel, and the yud is a mashpia. Okay, so that's just a little bit of context. So even though there is a procreative quality in the male drop in the sperm, mikol makim harimitipas hamad atzmei loy hayashum haylada. But from the sperm alone, there wouldn't be any birth. There wouldn't be any creation, and there won't be any children just from sperm alone. Ki'im ayidei kabalosi betipas man. But there needs to be the receiving of the sperm in the drop of the feminine waters into the ovum. Yeah, basic physiology. So that is sort of standard assumption that the father has the koyach haylada, shekoyach haylada betipas hamad, but it can't create alone, so it needs to come into the man. Sperm alone can't create children, so it needs an egg in order to create. That's how, in a sense, he's just describing how it would ordinarily be understood. But then he clarifies. Uba emes, and in truth, though, eka metzias havlad beramach evrim hu mitipas hamandavke. But the production of a child in all, 248 limbs, that is a product of the feminine waters, of the egg. It comes from the mother. The mother produces the child in all of its form. So how does it work? Elo shetipas hamad mevarer es haman. What is the role of the drop of the masculine waters of the sperm? It's to be mevarer the man, to refine and filter the feminine waters. It serves to help in the development of the embryo, because in the early stages of fertilization, after fertilization, it's called an embryo for the first 10 or so weeks, and then it becomes a fetus. So especially in the early stages, it's important to, there's a splitting of the cells. This is how we understand it now. This is not from the mind, but we understand there's a splitting of cells until it can become formed into and have all the necessary components of the embryo. So the role of the sperm, he describes as, it's to filter the ovum, livroyes hatoiv v'hamuvcha, to choose out the choicest and the best parts, and to remove the waste, so that from the prime genetic material you can produce the child. And from the psoilas nasa shilya, from the waste it's made a shilya. Shilya is a placenta. So the placenta, it doesn't just only deal with waste. The placenta has a whole bunch of roles. The placenta is an organ that is formed specifically for the purpose of pregnancy, and it develops inside the womb, and it deals with excretion, of getting rid of waste. But it also facilitates the attachment of the umbilical cord to the mother. It also does a whole range of other things. The placenta is a phenomenal organ. And then after birth, the placenta is also comes out, and it's thrown away. V'gam nitcha l'chutz. So you make the placenta, and it's also excreted. It comes out. So very interesting if you read studies about the sort of the impact. They're constantly doing studies to try and figure out the impact of the sperm and the semen in general on the development of these types of things. And sometimes they come up with a discovery and they say that it's specifically the genetic material in the sperm that makes a major difference to the production of the placenta, and sometimes just broadly speaking making a woman's body suited to be able to carry a baby. A lot of it can come from the genetic material that's found in the sperm, but they come up with studies here, there, and everywhere. Not negaya. Definitely, according to modern science, they would say that the sperm is a lot more involved in the production of a child than what is necessarily afforded to it here. The Rebbe Rashab emphasizes far more the contribution of the mother, whereas now we see it as being a much more even, at least from a genetic perspective. But clearly, it is.
Well, he's not saying over here genetically, blah blah blah. He's saying that he's bringing like facts and like what is the purpose. 3 things. One of them a male has, and the other 2 a female has. So from here we see that female is more important.
It's not just more important. I think if you were to assess what we understand from it now, we'd probably give the father a lot more credit. No, I'm just saying, and he's not necessarily concerned. He's not giving you a science lesson here. He's trying to emphasize the centrality of the female contribution, which is not necessarily always appreciated. So there's an added emphasis here. וגם זה מה מהמובחר נולד הוולד, יש בזה כוח טיפס המד. So as you say, that from this choicest material, which the father's contribution filtered in order to be the child, in that vlad, in that embryo, there is a koyach tipas hamad. There is the male, the father's contribution. Shehu anoisim bo hakoyach lahoilid. It gives the koyach that the embryo should grow and be able to produce a child. Umikol makim, but nevertheless, so all well and good, but nevertheless, haylodas havlad, betzir haramach evrim, the birth of a child in all of its form of the 248 limbs comes mitipas haman davka, comes from the female contribution specifically. So here we have another v'nimtza. So the conclusion of this is v'nimtza. The ika guf metzias havlad hu mikoyach atzmo davka. If you want to get to the core issue here, the creation of the existence of the actual physical existence of this child, of this embryo, and then in this fetus, and then ultimately into the child, is mikoyach atzmo davka, is from her reproductive quality, her creative ability. And that is because of her superior origin in the essence. Which is superior to the origin of the male reproductive abilities. And that is why the primary ability to procreate is in her specifically. But she also can't create, just like he can't create children without her, she, the mother, can't create children without him. So you still need to have hamshachas hamad. She can't just produce children without being impregnated by the male semen, male sperm. So why does she, if she has got such creative qualities, why can't she just create children? If she really is the main producer of the child, what role does the father play? No, we've described he filters stuff and he this, but it's a sort of a peripheral thing. Surely she should be able to develop the ability to do that herself and reproduce herself. Why does there need to be a father? Which is a radical question, right? It's a radical sort of even statement to even make. You think from a context of thinking of especially even a person associates procreative qualities with the father, he's completely turned the thing upside down now. He's given all the primacy to the mother, and now we have to justify the place of the father.
Yeah.
Is there any opinions as to the fact that perhaps they're both equally required? The male and the female?
They're both required. You can see they're both required.
Equally required.
Well, then they're different
they both
things.
possess the same amount of...
Not here. Here there's definitely an imbalance. They're both necessary, but they have different roles. And ultimately, the female is the primary creator, and the man is secondary and just a supportive actor in the process. So here we're going to justify or try and explain what role does the father play in enabling the creation of the child. So we need to have the father's contribution, hemshekh hamad, hu mipnei ki ha'atzmi hu eini begeder gilui, is because something which is essential, something which is an atzmi, is not in a state of expression. So I explained to you, I believe before, a general distinction between an atzmi and a gilui. A gilui is inherently bishvil hazulas, an expression of something, a revelation of something, is by definition revealing it to something. Yes? Giluyim are in the context of there being something else. That's its whole function. By contrast to an atzmi, something which is essential is that it doesn't need anything else. An etzem is something which is itself.
How's essential the translation of atzmi? Essential means something very important. Atzmi is not.
That's one interpretation of essential.
Tissues, toilet paper is also essential. Says Sainsbury's Essentials. Doesn't make it atzmi, no?
So you've taken one dictionary description of the word essential and you've connected it to
so
atzmi. So I'm explaining to you. Etzem means a bone. Right? It means something which is the core of something. When you something in its essence is something which is no longer divisible. It is the thing itself. It's not made of component parts. It's one thing.
So the source of something would be the atom of something.
Okay.
Would that be a mocker? Would that be a fair statement to make?
If you go to an extent, I mean, obviously you can have a degree of relativity to it.
Because you can have the source of that source as well, obviously.
Right. But ordinarily, when you say it's something that's an atzmi, is that it doesn't require anyone else to be. A gilui needs something else in order to be.
So are all humans atzmis, so to speak, because we don't need, except obviously Hashem, but...
Let's not go there. You have an etzem.
Fine.
But you're not necessarily an atzmi. That's a madrege.
Oh.
If your atzmius can be nispashit to your whole existence, then you're doing well. But just as a concept, an atzmi something that doesn't need anything else to be. It's independent. It's singular. Whereas a gilui needs something else. So when we're talking about this koyach hilada that a woman has, that is her koyach atzmi. Why does she have the need to create? Just like Malchus. Why does it have the capacity to create? Because not tchilas and b'seifan. Because the beginning is rooted in the end. They're all makablim, possess a sheirush kodem. By definition, if you're a makabel means you're the end of the process. You're the recipient of the process. So you become the end, and you're the culmination of everything. So all these qualities are rooted in essence. But what comes with that is that koyach is behelim. Kol etzim bilti miskala. Kol atmi bilti miskala. The etzim doesn't need to be miskala. It's not going to. If you leave an etzim to its own accord, it will just stay in etzim. It won't do anything. Like it says here, ki atmi hu eine begeder gilui umemela. This is shmakaloshen eine begeder pu'ula lifol chulu. It's going to this nekuda is going to come up. Right up again at the end of the Miyomayim, in the end of the hemshekh in the Chol Tichla. That it's einli begeder pu'ula lifel. Can't do anything. Shkoyach, you're an atzmi. You got this gewaldige koyach. Because what is the koyach? The koyach is that the Eibush, just like the Eibishter, is hu levadi bekoichel v'yicholtoi lahavit yesh mi'ayin. Why? Mishum de mitziyusi mi'atzmusi b'lishum ila v'siba akidemis lichas v'shon, like we have in the Geras HaKodesh, Simon Chav, that he is a truly independent entity. The Eibishter is an atzmi, that's atzmus. He's an atzmi. It's independent, comes from nowhere, stable, constant. And that's why when the more inanimate something is, what is a makabel? A makabel, in contrast to a mashpia is constantly in a tnu of giving. Mashpia is oir, gilu, needs to give. That itself is an instability. It can't stay still. It needs to constantly give. Whereas a makabel just is stable, constant. It's not. But poil is a makabel, meaning that it has nothing of its own. Makabel, it's in a state of Kabbalah because it doesn't have anything of its own. There's no self to even talk about it. It's like it's so stable, it's so in a way, it's the ultimate sort of yeshus of it's just a thing. And because of that quality, it's got a shaykhus to atzmus. So like the most inanimate, the most sort of seemingly non-spectacular thing has a koyach atzmi. But the problem is, it's just is. It's like a glob. It's like a glob. It doesn't do anything.
And is that what it means when it says Chassidus that Pashto Yidin have the pshutus of Atmos?
Yeah.
Is this the whole thing?
It's connected. Yeah. The Maila, the Tachton. That is the whole reason of Dirba Tachtonim, the whole Maila Tachtonim. Sada Tachtonim Gufa. The more Tachton, the better. The more Tachton, the more Atzmi. The Yesha Nivro, Yesha Amiti. These types of things, these types of Lashonis. This is the sugya that we're dealing with here. But the problem is, the Atzmi is Eina Begeda Gilu. Umamela Eina Begeda Pu'ul Lifa. So, Ukumayken Koyecha Etzem Shebahama Kabul Eina Begeda Pu'ul Atzmi. It's not going to self-trigger. The woman can't create children because this koyach atzmi in her is behelim. It's dormant. She possesses a koyach atzmi, but it's not dysfunctional. It's non-functional. In order to make it functional, there needs to be the arousal, the inspiration, the triggering from the mashpia. The mashpia knows all about activity. Because it's a gilu. Giluyim know what it means to get things done, to express itself, to be active. Because Giluyim is all about the activity of being Megal. What's an Oy? The Oy is Megala, the Mo'oy to a Zulas. That's the function of Oy. So the problem is, it's only an Oy, it's only a Ha'ara. Hasn't got shaykhs to the Etzem. But it knows how to reveal things. So we're going to have a perfect marriage over here. We've got something that knows how to be active, how to move, how to get things done. And we have a koyach atzmi. We can bring them together. Wow. You can produce a child. You can create a new entity. You can be godlike. Hemshekh atzmus. Create a new entity. Yesh ma'ayin. Creation yesh ma'ayin. By combining these two forces. Now, fundamentally, who does the create? Who is the real koyach atzmus that does the creation? The mother. But it wouldn't be possible without the facilitation, the coaching, the development, the arousing that comes from the father. So through the male procreative material, you have what he says is ke'en gilo ha'etzem. It's not quite, you can't say it's gilo ha'etzem because he doesn't have koyach, it's not an atzmi. But the mother, as we said before, facilitates that the male contribution should be more atzmiistic. Just like we said before, that Malchus enables there should be hemshekh of Kesel Azar. The mother causes that the husband's, the father's contribution is going to be more atzmiistic. It's going to be ashpah pnimis. It's going to be bedoimelo. It's going to contain his a real procreative quality, which is ki'ilui, an atzmiistic quality. Because she needs him, so they're working together in that way. And that's why we say that ordinarily people think that the sperm is the much more procreative thing, and it's the male contribution which is the primary contribution to childbirth. That's why it seems that way. But if you leave it alone, it's not going to be good enough. For all of its fantastic procreative dynamics that it has within it, inside the sperm, nevertheless, it won't be able to produce anything because it's just a gilui, and it's not etzem. The only thing that can create is the Eibishter. The only things that have the koyach ha'atzmus, the koyach ha'ilada, are going to be able to procreate. And he only has a ke'ein gilui ha'etzem. He's sort of nearly there. He's got a very enhanced form of gilui, and that helps him be able to influence the mother that she should be active, an active creator. So he arouses the procreative ability in the mother, so that such there should be gestation and birth. Avol guf havus, but the actual creation, hu me'amakabel davka, and mikoyach atzma, she has the fundamental procreative quality, and that's based on her deeper shadish. Hainu mitzad yisrin ma'alosa b'sharsha, because of her superior origin in atzmas. Commission spoiler ill, the shadish ha-malchus l'mayla min hazah, just like we said before, that malchus is rooted in zah, is higher than zah. The sharsha ba'atmas atika kadisha. The origin of malchus is in the essence of atik, and that's why it has the greater degree of binah. So besides for the fact that the hashpah that emanates from the mashpia, so his procreative ability is al yidei makabel dav, is because of her. Hine yesh bo davka koyach lahavus guf mechudash utzir havlad liyes b'deim aleichuli. She in her has the power to create an entirely new physical body in the form of the fetus, in the development of the fetus, such that it should be comparable to him, to the father, and to recreate human existence. And this is the phenomenal quality that she has and that he facilitates. So where we're at is that we've validated, in a sense, the role of the father in the process of procreation. Just like, and it's associated with how we explained, we validated the role of Zah in the creation of the world, which is going to be a little bit in the next paragraph in the Dugma L'Mayla, that Malchus also needs Zah. It needs Zah to be great and top form. Godel Hashem Muhulam Yeber Lekeinu. It needs it to be Godel. Needs it to have hemshekh Akesa in Zah. And then Malchus can do its thing and create the world, and create neshamas, and do all the things that it does. And so just to remember how this fits into broadly the hemshekh advarim, we have a medrash that talks about cups. And we want to understand what are the dynamics of a cup, of a makabel. So what we're bringing out over here, when we talk about hashbah pnimis, is in a way a far more profound impact that the makabel has than, say, dibur has, right? Dibur, the sachaka, what does it do? It reveals that's a manashama. So that what? You can have a deeper svara, a deeper emotion, a more profound idea. But the oifen hak, the inyan of hashbah pnimis, means that the makabel, in this case, the female, is able to reproduce a human being. Which is a gewaldige ufta. And that is the koyach of the makabel, of a kois, that it can be so, in a sense, cataclysmic. The hashpah into a makabel, meaning if it's megala, the koyach ha'atzmi of the makabel can be truly transformative, in a way even more than Malchus of Atzilus. The biological mother is even more transformative than Malchus of Atzilus is. That it can actually it can recreate itself. Malchus of Atzilus, what does Malchus of Atzilus create? It creates Bria, which is not Atzilus. Malchus can't create Atzilus. It can only create Bria. A mother can create a mother. So it's a much more impressive form of creation, in a sense, and that is because she's a makabel, and all makablim are ultimately mushrishnat, and that's why we have in the medrash a mashal of case.